Self-conditioning. The ideal of any trainer would be to bring an animal to a level where it is capable of training itself. This is something which still has to be achieved. But man is not an animal, and there comes a point when he does continue his own training because he is much more intelligent than his female trainer. This will work only as long as he never forgets the purpose of his education and keeps both reward and punishment in mind at all times. The world of pop songs is one example of man's efforts at self-manipulation. The best example of self-conditioning, however, is to be found in the advertising industry. In advertising, man does not idealize woman from any masochist tendency. It is purely a question of survival. Only his exploiters, women, have sufficient time and money to buy and consume all his products. To supply the woman inhabiting his ranch house with purchasing power, he has no choice but to cultivate legions of other women who have as much satisfaction as his own wife in spending. They will then buy his goods and keep his wife in pocket money. This is the beginning of a vicious circle which turns faster and faster until he cannot keep up with it anymore and someone else has to take over. There is no getting off and running away. Market research institutes investigate what they like to call subliminal female stimuli. The conscious ones have long since been satisfied, and then sell their discoveries to manufacturers. The latter then hurry to fill these so-called gaps in the consumer market as if there were in fact such things. Or sometimes they work in reverse. The producer invents a new article which he believes might appeal to women, and then hires an advertising agency to create the necessary consumer interest. Sometimes with success, sometimes without. The American craze for prefabricated houses, for example, has not caught on to a large extent in any of the European countries. Every few years, a wave of indignation sweeps over the male ranks as a result of this expensive fostering of the female craze for consumption. They have been blinded by the stereotyped image of woman as victim of male exploitation to such an extent that they do not realize that they themselves are, in fact, the sufferers. They maintain that women's naivete and their gullible, i.e. stupid natures, are exploited by advertisers for the purpose of increasing sales. One day these men will get around to asking themselves who is really being exploited. Is it the creature whose innermost wishes are sought out, coddled and fulfilled, or is it he who, in his desire to retain the affections of the woman, seeks out, coddles, and fulfills them? It has always been one of man's greatest aims in life to fulfill woman's innermost desires. In fact, to anticipate her every wish, as contemporary women's fiction still puts it. They have achieved their goal. There is practically no female desire left undiscovered, and probably very few which could not, if necessary, be fulfilled. The result is that women are getting increasingly more stupid, while men grow more and more intelligent. The gap between the sexes is widening constantly, making mutual understanding virtually impossible. But no one seems to notice. One of the basic principles of biology is that intelligence develops only in the face of competitive stimulation. Women, however, stand outside every competitive field. The glut of modern conveniences dulls their brains, reducing what little is left of their capacity for thought. Man, on the other hand, prodded by the need to create this comfort, to open up new sources of income, has to exert himself more and more. Surrounded by this ever-increasing comfort, the female sex is changing for the worse. The concept of femininity used to be applied to a woman who had the ability to bear children. It was also applied to venality. The definition must be enlarged to include imbecility. If Marx is wrong, and the word being determines the extent of man's being aware, the pill, for instance, would determine sexual mores, and the atom bomb would stalemate the ideologies of peace. To the same extent, the self-awareness of Western woman, whose situation in life has changed, improved, basically over the last 20 years, is now in a state of acute transformation. This metamorphosis, which can only result in the utter stultification of woman, is all the more dangerous because no one seems to have noticed it. Woman's image is no longer created by woman, but by advertising, that is, by man. And if anyone even starts to doubt the truth of woman's value, then there are 100 snappy advertising slogans ready at hand to disprove such a thought. Advertising says that woman is witty, intelligent, creative, imaginative, warm-hearted, practical, and capable. Smiling sweetly, with all the airs of a goddess, she dispenses the latest discovery in instant drinks to her grateful brood. Her husband's eyes follow her adoringly as she serves up a new pre-cooked meal, which is so much more to his taste. Or maybe she hands him a Turkish towel, which is even softer than usual, the result of a new rinse. This image of woman, created by man in order to sell his goods, is repeated incessantly with the help of mass media throughout the Western Hemisphere. And each day it is being reinforced. How could anyone dare to admit, even to himself, that in reality women are unimaginative, stupid, and insensitive? It would obviously be too much to expect of women, and it is an admission men cannot afford. Women buys, man sells, but one does not convince a customer by saying, "It's good, you've got to buy it." Instead we say, "You are marvelous, you deserve the best. Why should you make do with anything less? You've earned your comfort. You are entitled to it." So, on top of everything else, man has to flatter woman because he needs her as a customer. It is striking that the trick men are using here appears similar to the one used by women to train men. But sadly, it is not, since man turns it against himself. She praises him to get him to work for her, but he praises her to make her spend his money. If a man flatters and talks to his neighbor's wife into buying new wall-to-wall carpeting for her living room, he must realize that this same neighbor will sell his own wife a bathtub the next day. How else could he pay for the carpeting? Man is caught in a trap of his own making. While outside the struggle for money is becoming fiercer and fiercer, at home his wife is growing more moronic, and from day to day his house fills up with more junk and knickknacks, thereby financing the stultification of her husband's competitors' wives. Men who in fact prefer the plain and functional every day find themselves more deeply entangled in the undergrowth of superfluous ornamentation and all kinds of embellishments. In their living rooms, the porcelain cats, bar stools, glass-topped tables, candelabra, and silk cushions pile up. In their bedrooms, the walls are papered with floral patterns. In their cabinets, a dozen different kinds of glasses are lined up. All the shelves are filled with the 1,000 creams and cosmetics of their artfully made-up wives. It is interesting that nearly the only products sold are those of benefit to women. Sports cars, with which to entice her, luxury goods for women, or household appliances, also for women, since the house actually belongs to her. Man is, in fact, a homeless creature, moving constantly between office and house. Women would be delighted to buy things for their husbands for whatever occasion, using the latter's money, of course, They give ties, sports shirts, ashtrays, wallets as often as possible. The problem is that a man needs so very little. His clothing is standardized, hence inexpensive. His consumption of food and drink is restricted in case it affects his work capacity, and he has no time to consume other goods except cigarettes, which he smokes at work. Industry has made every effort to get men interested in aftershave lotions, hairsprays, or gaily colored leisure wear, but usually in vain. Only young men will take to the latest short-lived fashion. Their earning potential, however, is too low to interest women. Rich men, whom women love anyway, and artists, who act as a kind of court jester to them, are allowed to sport the latest in clothes, and queers maybe, but not the average man. Another example of this is Father's Day, which is still not very popular in spite of all the advertising, whereas Mother's Day is a bonanza for everyone concerned. The best thing men can do on their day of celebration is retire to a bar and have a few beers in peace. Apart from eating, drinking, and smoking, sex is the only activity where man is an independent consumer. He must be able to satisfy his sexual urge. No wonder whole branches of industry are given over to this trade, taking advantage of this need to make him even more lustful and to persuade him to buy goods which merely serve to increase his desire. Satisfaction, of course, is another matter. That has to be had from a woman at a customary price. As such firms are usually run by men, in order to live, a man finds himself in the embarrassing position of having to make lechers of his fellow males. He caters to male desire for women in every conceivable way and proceeds, much like Alexander Pavlov and his dog, establishing conditioned reflexes. Pavlov made his dog's mouth water merely by ringing a bell, which meant dinner. In this case, man encourages his fellow men to get an erection by producing photos of half-naked breasts, by means of a suggestive sigh in a popular song, perhaps, or by writing a certain sentence in a book. That is why man will invent a whole range of methods of obtaining an erection, which another man will have to pay for. And of course, this mechanism does not bring returns only to manufacturers of erotica. All other industries take advantage of it too. Presents for women are sold to men by means of a picture of an attractive female bosom. A man will read a book or see a movie because he hopes it will give him a kick. And as a secondary effect, he may suddenly feel the desire to go around the world with this woman, to buy a weekend cottage in the mountains, or to get a sports car. The American men's magazine Playboy provides us with one of the best proofs of man's methods of self-conditioning. Sandwiched between wonderful pairs of naked breasts are excellent articles of a highly theoretical nature to entertain him and to offer him respite between erections. All of this is padded with offers of expensive cars, liquor, unnecessary clothing, and smokers' accessories. Women are highly offended by magazines like these, but men have lost all sense of the grotesque in this situation. The cult of the bosom has become something quite independent and depersonalized. The sex industry has told men so often and so successfully that women's breasts are there to attract him that he has quite forgotten their real purpose. The diversion was entirely successful. As a result of the invention of substitutes for mother's milk, he rarely has a chance to watch a baby feed at its mother's breast.